My name is Sonia Mitchell, and I'm 35 years old. 3 minutes before the quarterly board meeting, my boss, Marcus, fired me for overstepping. After 3 years as senior finance director, I was suddenly too emotional and not a team player. Little did he know my microphone was still connected to the boardroom, capturing every word as he discussed the $2.9 billion deal. I was about to let the board hear his real voice. Before I continue this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe to hear how I turned this betrayal into my greatest victory. The journey to that fateful morning began 12 years earlier when I graduated with my MBA from Northwestern University. Growing up in a middle-class family in Chicago as the eldest of 3 children, I had watched my parents work tirelessly to provide for us. My father, a high school math teacher, and my mother, who managed a local bank branch, had instilled in me a strong work ethic and unwavering integrity. They sacrificed to put me through college, and I was determined to make them proud. My career in finance started at a mid-sized consulting firm where I specialized in mergers and acquisitions. I was meticulous, detail-oriented, and straightforward in my approach. Colleagues appreciated my thoroughness, though some found my directness intimidating. I didn't sugarcoat problems, which sometimes ruffled feathers, but ultimately earned me respect. Over the years, I developed expertise in identifying financial irregularities and optimizing complex business transactions. After 7 years of climbing the corporate ladder at 2 different firms, I landed the position of senior finance director at TechVision, a software company valued at several $billion. At the time, joining TechVision felt like winning the lottery. The company had been founded 15 years earlier by 2 college roommates who developed an innovative enterprise software platform. From humble beginnings in a garage, it had grown to employ over 3,000 people across offices in 6 countries. When I joined, TechVision was entering a new phase of aggressive expansion. The original founders had stepped back from daily operations, bringing in experienced executives to scale the business. The company culture was undergoing a transformation, shifting from the collaborative startup mentality to a more structured corporate environment. The pressure to maintain growth and profitability was intensifying as investors demanded ever-increasing returns. Marcus Wilson had been CEO for 5 years when I arrived. At 42 years old, he was charismatic and polished with an impressive pedigree, including an Ivy League education and previous executive roles at 2 Fortune 500 companies. The business media adored him frequently, featuring him on magazine covers as a visionary leader transforming the tech industry. Within the company, however, a different picture emerged. Marcus led with an authoritarian style that brooked no disagreement. He surrounded himself with yes-men who reinforced his ideas and shielded him from criticism. In meetings, he dominated conversations and frequently dismissed ideas that weren't his own, especially those coming from female executives. His behavior was subtle enough that it couldn't clearly be labeled as discrimination, but the pattern was unmistakable to those who paid attention. Despite these warning signs, I initially respected Marcus for his strategic thinking and ability to close major deals. His track record of success was undeniable, though I noticed that recent quarters had shown concerning trends in the company's core business metrics. These issues were carefully obscured in public presentations through clever financial maneuvering, something that raised my professional antenna but didn't immediately trigger alarm bells. During my first year at TechVision, Marcus and I maintained a cordial professional relationship. He recognized my financial expertise and occasionally sought my input on complex transactions. I contributed to several successful initiatives that boosted the company's bottom line, earning positive performance reviews and a substantial year-end bonus. The dynamic began to shift during my second year. As I gained deeper insight into the company's operations, I started raising questions about financial decisions that seemed questionable. Initially, Marcus deflected these concerns with plausible explanations or promises to address them later. Gradually, however, I noticed he began excluding me from certain meetings where strategic financial decisions were made. More troublingly, I discovered that Marcus had presented several of my financial analyses to the board as his own work. When I carefully broached this subject with him, suggesting that collaborative credit might be appropriate, his demeanor instantly changed. The board doesn't need to know every person who contributes to our success, Sonia, he said coldly. As CEO, I represent the entire executive team. Your recognition comes in your compensation package. From that point forward, our interactions became increasingly strained. Marcus would publicly praise my work when it served his purposes, but privately undermine my authority with other executives. Despite this challenging environment, I maintained my professionalism and continued to perform my duties with the highest standards. I believed that excellent work would eventually speak for itself, a notion I would later recognize as naively optimistic in a system designed to protect those at the top. The first concrete indication that something was seriously amiss came during my routine review of quarterly expenditure reports. While analyzing executive expense accounts, I noticed a pattern of large payments to an external consulting firm called Meridian Partners. The amounts were substantial, often between $50,000 and $100,000 per month. But the documentation describing their services was vague at best. What caught my attention wasn't just the size of the payments, but their timing. They frequently coincided with Marcus's international business trips, particularly to Singapore and the Cayman Islands. When I cross-referenced these payments with deliverables from Meridian Partners, I found little evidence of actual work product commensurate with the fees paid. Following protocol, I scheduled a meeting with Marcus to discuss these findings. His initial reaction seemed off, a brief flash of alarm crossing his face before he composed himself. Meridian handles sensitive, competitive intelligence and strategic planning, he explained dismissively. Their work is confidential, even within our executive team. The board has approved this arrangement. When I requested documentation of this board approval, Marcus became visibly irritated. This falls under my discretionary authority as CEO. I don't need to justify every business relationship to my subordinates. The conversation ended abruptly when his assistant interrupted with an urgent call that conveniently required my immediate departure. Unsatisfied with this explanation, I decided to consult my direct supervisor, Jessica Parker, the Chief Financial Officer. Jessica had been with TechVision for 8 years, predating Marcus's tenure as CEO. She had a reputation for integrity, though some colleagues considered her overly cautious and politically risk-averse. We met for coffee at a small cafe 3 blocks from the office, away from prying eyes and ears. After I outlined my concerns, Jessica stared into her latte for a long moment before responding. "Sonia, your attention to detail is why I hired you," she said quietly. "But sometimes knowing too much at this company isn't helpful." The warning in her tone was unmistakable. When I pressed for clarification, Jessica sighed deeply. "Marcus has the complete confidence of the board. He's delivered record profits for 5 consecutive years, and no one wants to rock that boat. Previous executives who challenged his methods found themselves marginalized very quickly." "Are you telling me to ignore potentially improper financial transactions?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice even. Jessica's response was careful and measured. "I'm telling you that pursuing this without ironclad evidence would be career suicide. Marcus doesn't tolerate what he perceives as disloyalty. Document everything, protect yourself, but be extremely careful about making accusations." Her warning left me deeply troubled, but even more determined to understand what was happening. I needed more information and potentially allies who could help navigate this increasingly dangerous situation. My search for allies led me to Rachel Davidson, a sharp-minded senior attorney in our legal department. We had collaborated on several projects and developed a friendly rapport. Over lunch in the company cafeteria, I carefully steered our conversation toward corporate governance and compliance. Rachel proved receptive to my subtle probing. "The legal team isn't always brought in early enough on major decisions," she confided. "We're often asked to review contracts after terms are essentially finalized, which puts us in a difficult position if we identify issues." Over the following weeks, Rachel and I established a discreet alliance, sharing information that individually might seem innocent but together formed a troubling pattern. Rachel revealed that Meridian Partners had unusual contractual protections that she had questioned, only to be overruled by TechVision's general counsel at Marcus's insistence. Further research revealed that Meridian Partners had been incorporated just 3 years earlier, shortly after Marcus became CEO. Its ownership structure was deliberately obscured through a series of shell companies. While this wasn't illegal in itself, it raised serious questions about potential conflicts of interest. As my investigation deepened, I noticed Marcus beginning to isolate me professionally. Invitations to strategic planning meetings stopped coming. My input was solicited less frequently on major financial decisions. Projects that would normally fall under my purview were reassigned to other directors with vague explanations about balancing workloads. The isolation extended beyond work assignments. Colleagues with whom I'd previously had friendly relationships began maintaining a polite distance. Lunch invitations dwindled, and conversations would sometimes halt awkwardly when I approached groups of coworkers. Through the company grapevine, I learned that Marcus had been characterizing me as difficult and unnecessarily confrontational to other executives. Sonia's brilliant with numbers, he reportedly told the head of product development, but she doesn't understand the big picture strategy, and she can be quite emotional when challenged. This deliberate undermining of my professional reputation was both infuriating and alarming. Marcus was systematically creating a narrative that would justify whatever action he might eventually take against me, while simultaneously diminishing my credibility should I raise concerns about his conduct. Despite these challenges, I continued performing my responsibilities with diligence and professionalism, building a detailed documentation trail of every questionable transaction and decision. If confrontation was coming, I was determined to be prepared with facts that couldn't be easily dismissed. The announcement of TechVision's potential $2.9 billion acquisition of Megacorp, a leading competitor in the enterprise software space, sent shockwaves through the industry. The press release described it as a transformative strategic combination that would create unprecedented value for shareholders and customers alike. Wall Street responded enthusiastically, sending our stock price up 22% in a single day. Marcus became an overnight sensation in business circles, hailed as a visionary who had orchestrated the deal of the decade. Financial news channels featured glowing profiles of his leadership, and the board awarded the executive team substantial bonuses for bringing the deal to this stage. Despite my growing concerns about Marcus, I received a $750,000 bonus, which prompted significant soul-searching about my complicity in a system I was beginning to deeply distrust. Behind the scenes, the pressure to complete the acquisition within the next quarter was intense. Marcus made it clear that failure wasn't an option, repeatedly stating in executive meetings that this deal will define TechVision's future and secure our legacy. The timeline was aggressive, requiring our team to work around the clock to conduct due diligence and prepare regulatory filings. As I led the financial analysis portion of the due diligence process, troubling discrepancies began to emerge. Megacorp's revenue growth in certain divisions appeared artificially inflated through accounting techniques that, while technically legal, painted an overly optimistic picture of their financial health. More concerning were the projections for post-merger synergies that formed the foundation of the deal's valuation. The models predicted cost savings and revenue enhancements that seemed wildly unrealistic based on my experience with similar integrations. When I recalculated the numbers using more conservative assumptions, the deal's projected return on investment dropped from 40% to less than 15% over 5 years, barely above our cost of capital. My investigation also revealed a suspicious connection. Meridian Partners had provided the initial valuation analysis that justified the $2.9 billion price tag. The same firm receiving questionable payments tied to Marcus's travel was now validating the largest acquisition in company history. The final piece fell into place when Rachel discreetly shared an email she had discovered during her legal review. The message sent from Marcus's personal email to the CEO of Meridian Partners referenced a separate compensation arrangement that would be activated upon successful closing of the Megacorp deal. Though carefully worded to avoid explicit illegality, the implication of an undisclosed side agreement was unmistakable. Armed with this information, I requested a private meeting with Marcus to discuss my concerns about the acquisition valuation. His assistant initially attempted to deflect me, claiming his schedule was fully booked for weeks. After I persisted mentioning specific issues with the financial models that required immediate attention, a 30-minute slot mysteriously appeared for the following morning. Marcus greeted me with artificial warmth when I entered his corner office with its panoramic view of the city skyline. "Sonia, I hear you have some thoughts on the megacorp analysis. I always value your attention to detail even when we need to move quickly." I presented my findings, methodically explaining the discrepancies in Megacorp's financial statements and the unrealistic synergy projections. Based on these revised calculations, I concluded we would be significantly overpaying at the current valuation. I recommend we either renegotiate the purchase price or reconsider the strategic rationale for this acquisition. As I spoke, I watched Marcus's demeanor transform. The practiced smile vanished, replaced by thinly veiled contempt. When I finished, he leaned back in his custom leather chair, regarding me coldly. "Let me explain something, Sonia," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "This deal has been in development for over a year. The board is fully committed. Our largest investors are expecting it to close. The integration plans are already being implemented. And you think you can waltz in here with some spreadsheet adjustments and derail all of that?" "I'm not trying to derail anything," I replied evenly. "I'm fulfilling my fiduciary duty to ensure the company makes sound financial decisions based on accurate information." Marcus's laugh was devoid of humor. "Your duty is to execute the strategic vision set by your leadership. This company doesn't operate by committee, especially when it comes to transformational opportunities like Megacorp." He stood abruptly, signaling the end of our meeting. "Who do you think you are to challenge me on this? The board trusts my judgment, not yours. If you can't be a team player, perhaps you should reconsider whether Tech Vision is the right place for you." As I turned to leave, Marcus added, "And Sonia, keep your concerns to yourself. Financial markets are sensitive to rumors, and spreading doubt about this acquisition would constitute a serious breach of your confidentiality obligations." The threat was unmistakable. I left his office shaken, but more convinced than ever that something fundamentally corrupt was unfolding at the company I had dedicated 3 years of my professional life to building. The following day, Rachel texted me asking to meet at a coffee shop several blocks from the office. Her expression was grave as she slid into the booth across from me. "I overheard something you need to know," she whispered, glancing nervously around the half-empty cafe. Marcus was meeting with Harold from HR in the executive lounge. They didn't realize I was in the adjacent booth. Rachel took a deep breath before continuing. "Marcus told Harold to start preparing your termination paperwork. He said he'd handle Sonia after the quarterly board meeting next week. He specifically mentioned concerns about your judgment and alignment with company values as the official justification." The news wasn't entirely surprising given my confrontation with Marcus, but the timing confirmed my suspicions. He planned to eliminate me as a threat before I could raise concerns about the Megacorp acquisition to the board. "There's more," Rachel added. He instructed Harold to conduct an exit interview, focused on documenting any emotional reactions you might have. He specifically said they needed to build a record of instability in case you tried to make trouble after leaving. The calculated nature of the plan to not only remove me but discredit me in the process left me cold with anger. Marcus wasn't just protecting a questionable business deal. He was deliberately planning to destroy my professional reputation to silence me. "Thank you for telling me," I said to Rachel. "I need to decide how to respond to this." "Be careful," she warned. "Marcus has the entire executive team and board wrapped around his finger. Taking him on directly could end very badly for your career." As I walked back to the office, my mind raced with possible courses of action. The quarterly board meeting was only 8 days away. Whatever I decided to do, I had very little time to prepare. The morning of the quarterly board meeting arrived with a sense of foreboding. I had slept poorly, running through various scenarios in my mind. Having decided that truth was my only real option, I had prepared a detailed presentation highlighting the concerns about the Megacorp acquisition and the questionable payments to Meridian Partners. I had no illusions about the risks I was taking, but remaining silent felt like a betrayal of everything I believed in professionally and personally. I arrived at the office earlier than usual at 6:30 to review my materials one final time before the 9 o'clock board meeting. The executive floor was quiet, with only the occasional early riser present. I had just settled at my desk when my email pinged with a message from Marcus. Please come to my office immediately. Urgent matter to discuss before the board meeting. My heart raced as I gathered my tablet and notebook. This confrontation was coming sooner than I had anticipated, but perhaps it was better to have it out in the open, rather than wondering when the axe would fall. I took a deep breath to steady myself, then walked purposefully to Marcus's office. His assistant wasn't at her desk yet, but his door was open. Marcus sat behind his massive desk, already dressed in the bespoke suit he reserved for board meetings. Standing beside him was Harold Jenkins, the head of human resources, his expression a practiced mask of professional neutrality. Sonia, please take a seat, Marcus said, gesturing to the chair across from him. His tone was formal, lacking the false warmth he typically employed. I remained standing. I prefer to stand if this will be brief. The board meeting is in 2 hours, and I need to finalize my presentation. A flash of irritation crossed Marcus's face. That won't be necessary. I've removed you from the agenda. On whose authority, I asked, though I already knew the answer. Mine as chief executive officer of this company, Marcus replied coldly. But that's the least of your concerns right now. Harold is here because we're terminating your employment effective immediately. Despite having been warned by Rachel, the bluntness of the statement still hit me like a physical blow. Harold stepped forward, holding out a manila folder. This contains the details of your separation agreement, he explained in a detached, professional tone. The company is prepared to offer 6 months of severance pay in exchange for a standard non-disparagement agreement and release of all claims. I made no move to take the folder. What is the stated reason for my termination? Marcus leaned forward, resting his forearms on the desk. Officially, we're eliminating your position as part of a reorganization of the finance department. Unofficially, since we're being direct here, you've repeatedly overstepped your authority and created conflict within the executive team. Your emotional approach to business decisions has become a liability as we navigate this critical acquisition. The accusation of being emotional, a thinly veiled, gendered criticism, made my blood boil, but I maintained my composure. I see. And my concerns about the financial irregularities in the megacorp valuation, the questionable payments to Meridian partners, are those also examples of my emotional approach? Harold shifted uncomfortably, but Marcus didn't flinch. Your conspiracy theories about standard business relationships demonstrate exactly why this action is necessary. You've lost perspective, Sonia. You'll need to clear out your office immediately, Harold interjected. We've arranged for security to escort you once you've collected your personal belongings. Your email access will be terminated within the hour. And the board meeting, I asked? Am I still permitted to attend remotely as an observer? As a significant shareholder, I have that right. Marcus and Harold exchanged a glance. Yes, Marcus finally said. You may observe the public portions of the meeting via Zoom. The login details are in your email. But I remind you that your confidentiality obligations continue even after your employment ends. Another threat thinly disguised. I nodded once, then turned to leave without taking the separation agreement folder. Harold called after me. Sonia, you need to review and sign these documents today. I'll have my attorney contact you, I replied without looking back. The next hour passed in a blur as I packed my personal items under the watchful eye of a security guard who had been instructed not to leave me alone. The humiliation was clearly intentional, designed to make an example of me to other employees. Colleagues stared as I carried my box to the elevator, some with sympathy. Others carefully averting their gaze to avoid association with someone who had clearly fallen from favor. By 8:30, I had returned to my apartment still in a state of shock, despite having anticipated this outcome. I set up my laptop on the dining table and logged into the Zoom meeting for the quarterly board presentation, scheduled to begin at 9. The system connected me automatically, but I kept my camera off, not wanting to reveal my location or emotional state. As I waited for the meeting to begin, I noticed something unusual. The meeting showed that I was connected to the audio system in boardroom A, rather than just the general Zoom call. This meant my laptop microphone was linked directly to the speakers in the physical boardroom where the executives and board members would be gathering. The previous week, I had given a presentation in that same room and had connected my laptop to the room's audio system. Apparently, the IT department had failed to disconnect my device credentials when setting up the board meeting. It was a fortunate technical oversight that was about to become very significant. I watched as people began entering the boardroom through the Zoom camera feed. Board members greeted each other cordially, followed by the executive team. Marcus entered last, exuding confidence as he shook hands and exchanged pleasantries with the directors. No one acknowledged or seemed to notice my name on the participant list, likely assuming it was just part of the technical setup. The board chair called the meeting to order, beginning with standard governance matters. I listened attentively, taking notes on key points. The meeting proceeded to the CEO update, where Marcus took center stage to discuss quarterly results and the status of strategic initiatives. Before we moved to the Megacorp acquisition discussion, Marcus announced I should inform the board that I made a personnel change this morning. Sonia Mitchell is no longer with the company. A murmur went through the room and the board chair, Eleanor Winters, looked surprised. Sonia was scheduled to present the financial analysis of the acquisition today. This is rather sudden, Marcus. Unfortunately, it became necessary to act quickly, Marcus replied smoothly. Sonia has been increasingly erratic in her behavior and judgments. She began making unfounded accusations about the deal structure and company financial practices. Her emotional state was becoming disruptive to the team during this critical period. I watched in disbelief as Marcus systematically dismantled my professional reputation, knowing I was listening but unaware I was connected to the room's audio system. Between us, he continued, lowering his voice slightly. I believe she was feeling overwhelmed by the complexity of the Megacorp integration. Rather than admit this, she began manufacturing concerns to justify her inability to execute. Classic case of someone promoted beyond their capabilities. Jessica will present the financial analysis instead. Jessica Parker. My former boss looked distinctly uncomfortable, but said nothing to contradict Marcus's characterization. No one at the table defended me or questioned the timing of my sudden departure on the day of a major board presentation. As the meeting progressed to a break before the Megacorp acquisition discussion, most board members left the room to get refreshments. Marcus remained behind with the chief legal officer, Michael Thompson, apparently believing they were alone. That went smoothly, Marcus said, loosening his tie slightly. The board didn't even question Sonia's removal. You need to be careful about what you say about her publicly, Michael cautioned. Wrongful termination claims are expensive even when they lack merit. Marcus laughed dismissively. She won't cause problems. The non-disparagement agreement will keep her quiet, and I've made sure her reputation won't hold much weight if she tries to raise concerns elsewhere. And if she doesn't sign? Michael asked. Everyone has a price, Marcus replied confidently. If the standard package isn't enough, we can negotiate. It's still cheaper than having her interfere with the Megacorp deal. Speaking of which, did you finish restructuring the Meridian Partners contract, like we discussed? Yes, the revised terms obscure the success fee arrangement. It's now structured as a multi-phase consulting engagement with the final payment due after closing. No obvious connection to deal completion. Perfect, Marcus said. And our friends offshore. The Cayman entity is prepared to receive the funds once the acquisition closes. The routing is untraceable as requested. My blood ran cold as I listened to this explicit confirmation of what I had suspected. Marcus had arranged a kickback scheme tied to the Megacorp acquisition with Meridian Partners, serving as the conduit for funds that would ultimately flow to him through an offshore entity. The board would have a collective heart attack if they knew what the real numbers look like. Marcus continued chuckling. Megacorp's cloud division revenue is inflated by at least 30% through those long-term contract accelerations we helped them structure. The synergy projections are pure fantasy. As long as the deal closes, no one will look too closely, Michael replied. By the time any issues surface, they'll be buried in integration challenges that can be blamed on unforeseen market conditions. Exactly. The share price bump has already increased my options value by 11 million. Once the offshore payments clear, this deal will set me up for life, regardless of what happens to TechVision afterward. The casual way they discussed deliberately misleading shareholders and the board about a multi-billion-dollar acquisition was stunning, even given my suspicions. I quickly began recording the conversation, using my phone's voice recorder, placing it near my laptop speaker. As board members began returning to the room, Marcus and Michael switched to discussing mundane aspects of the presentation. I sat frozen at my dining table now, holding documented evidence of securities fraud and breach of fiduciary duty by the CEO and chief legal officer of a publicly traded company. The decision about what to do next was suddenly crystal clear. As the board meeting continued, I sprang into action. First, I secured the recording I had just made, uploading it to an encrypted cloud storage account and sending a copy to my personal email. Next, I pulled together the documentation I had been gathering over the past months, the irregular payments to Meridian Partners, the flawed Megacorp valuation models, and the emails Rachel had shared showing Marcus's connections to these entities. With trembling hands but resolute determination, I drafted an email to the entire board of directors. The subject line was simple: critical information regarding the Megacorp acquisition and CEO misconduct. I attached my evidence, including the recording, and wrote a clear, factual summary of what I had discovered. I concluded with, as a financial officer with fiduciary responsibilities to our shareholders, I could not in good conscience remain silent about these matters. I am available at your convenience to discuss this further. Before hitting send, I also prepared a separate communication to the Securities and Exchange Commission's whistleblower office. While I hoped the board would take appropriate action, I wasn't naive enough to assume they would act without external pressure. After reviewing both messages one final time, I took a deep breath and clicked send on both. The effect was almost immediate. Within 15 minutes, I observed through the still active Zoom connection that several board members were looking at their phones with expressions of alarm. Eleanor Winters, the board chair, whispered something to the lead independent director, who nodded gravely. She then interrupted Marcus mid-presentation. I believe we need to take a short recess, Eleanor announced firmly. Board members, please remain. Executive team will ask you to step out for approximately 30 minutes. Marcus looked confused and annoyed. We're in the middle of the Megacorp discussion. What's this about, Eleanor? It's a governance matter that requires immediate attention, she replied coolly. We'll resume shortly. The executives filed out, with Marcus being the last to leave, throwing a suspicious glance toward the board members who were now huddled in intense discussion. Once the executives were gone, Eleanor addressed the room, unaware that I could still hear everything through the audio connection. I assume you've all received Sonia Mitchell's email and attachments, she began. The allegations are extremely serious, and if substantiated, represent multiple violations of securities laws and our corporate governance policies. I've listened to the recording, said James Peterson, who chaired the audit committee. It's damning. Marcus and Michael explicitly discussed misleading this board about material aspects of the Megacorp acquisition and apparently have some sort of personal financial arrangement tied to the deal. We need outside counsel immediately, another director added. This isn't something we can investigate internally, especially with the chief legal officer implicated. Agreed, Eleanor said. I'll contact Hamilton and Rogers. They have no prior relationship with the company and are respected for their work in corporate investigations. The discussion continued for 20 minutes, with the board unanimously agreeing to suspend Marcus and Michael pending an investigation, delay any final decision on the Megacorp acquisition, and establish an independent committee to oversee the process. When the executives were invited back into the room, they found a very different atmosphere than the one they had left. Eleanor stood as Marcus entered, her expression grave. Marcus Wilson and Michael Thompson, the board, has received credible evidence of serious misconduct related to the Megacorp acquisition and other financial matters. Effective immediately, you are both suspended with pay pending the results of an independent investigation. Please surrender your company devices and building access cards to security who are waiting outside. Marcus's face contorted with rage. What evidence? What are you talking about? We have a recording of your conversation with Michael during the break, Eleanor stated calmly. Among other things, you explicitly discussed deceiving this board about Megacorp's financial condition and arrangements to personally profit from the transaction. The color drained from Marcus's face as he realized what had happened. His eyes darted to the conference room phone in the center of the table, then to the Zoom participant list displayed on the wall screen. Understanding dawned as he saw my name still connected to the call. This is a setup, he sputtered. Sonia Mitchell was just fired for incompetence. She's clearly fabricated this so-called evidence out of spite. The investigation will determine the facts, Eleanor replied firmly. Until then, neither of you will have any contact with employees, customers, or shareholders of TechVision. Any violation of these terms will result in immediate termination for cause. Security personnel appeared at the doorway, waiting to escort Marcus and Michael from the building. The humiliation I had experienced hours earlier was now being visited upon them, but for legitimate reasons rather than intimidation tactics. As Marcus was led away, he turned back to the board. You're making a catastrophic mistake. The Megacorp deal is crucial to our future. Without it, our growth story collapses. Eleanor's response was measured but resolute. If the deal is based on fraudulent representations, it would destroy this company. The board's first duty is to our shareholders and the integrity of our business. Within an hour of the board meeting's dramatic conclusion, I received a call from Eleanor Winters herself. Her tone was respectful, a marked contrast to how I had been treated earlier that day. Miss Mitchell, this is Eleanor Winters. First, let me thank you for bringing this information to our attention. The board takes these allegations extremely seriously. Thank you for listening, I replied. I didn't make this decision lightly. I understand. We've retained independent counsel to investigate the matter thoroughly. Would you be willing to meet with them to share what you know? Absolutely, I confirmed. I have additional documentation that supports what you heard in the recording. Excellent, Eleanor said. In the meantime, we'd like to place your termination on hold. Technically, you remain an employee on administrative leave, with full pay and benefits while the investigation proceeds. This unexpected development caught me off guard. I appreciate that, but I'm not sure I can return to TechVision after what's happened. Let's cross that bridge later, Eleanor suggested. For now, we need your expertise to understand exactly what's been happening with our finances. The board has formed a special committee to review the Megacorp acquisition and other transactions flagged in your documentation. Your input would be invaluable. By that evening, news of the executive shakeup at TechVision had broken. The company issued a terse press release stating that the CEO and CLO had been suspended pending an internal investigation into potential irregularities related to a proposed acquisition. The stock plummeted in after-hours trading, losing nearly 30% of its value as investors panicked about the uncertainty. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. I spent hours with the independent investigators walking them through my evidence and explaining the financial mechanisms that had been manipulated. Rachel also came forward providing crucial documentation from the legal department that corroborated my concerns. More unexpectedly, other employees began speaking up once Marcus's intimidating presence was removed. Jessica Parker, my former boss, admitted to the investigators that she had been aware of some of the financial manipulations, but had felt powerless to challenge Marcus. He made it clear that anyone who questioned his methods would be marginalized or removed, she explained. I deeply regret not having Sonia's courage. Within 2 weeks, the preliminary findings of the investigation confirmed the worst of my allegations. Marcus had indeed established an elaborate kickback scheme tied to the Megacorp acquisition, with at least $4 million in payments already made to offshore entities he controlled. The megacorp financial projections had been deliberately falsified to justify the inflated purchase price, with Meridian Partners producing fraudulent valuation reports to support the deception. The investigation also uncovered other instances of financial misconduct predating my time at the company, suggesting a pattern of behavior that had escalated as Marcus consolidated his power. The board had been systematically misled about the company's true financial condition for years. As these findings emerged, I received another call from Eleanor Winters. "The board would like to meet with you tomorrow if you're available. We have an important matter to discuss." The following day, I found myself in the same boardroom where less than a month earlier I had been denigrated and dismissed by Marcus. Now I was welcomed with respect and seated at the main table rather than relegated to the periphery. "Sonia, the board wants to formally apologize for how you were treated," Eleanor began. "We failed in our oversight responsibilities and allowed a toxic leadership culture to flourish. Your integrity and courage in coming forward have prevented what could have been a catastrophic acquisition based on fraudulent information." "Thank you," I replied, genuinely moved by the acknowledgement. My only goal was to protect the company and its shareholders. "Which brings us to the purpose of this meeting," Eleanor continued. "We would like to offer you the position of Executive Vice President of Corporate Strategy and Finance. In this role, you would report directly to the board while we search for a new CEO. Your first responsibility would be to help us rebuild trust with investors, employees, and regulators." The offer was stunning, representing a 2-level promotion from my previous position. It was also a profound validation of my professional judgment and ethical stance. "I'm honored by your confidence," I said carefully, "but I need to be sure that this represents a genuine commitment to changing the company culture, not just replacing problematic individuals." "A fair concern," Eleanor agreed. "The board has already approved a comprehensive governance reform package, including strengthened whistleblower protections, enhanced financial controls, and mandatory ethics training for all executives. We're also restructuring the audit committee to ensure more rigorous oversight. We want TechVision to become a model of corporate integrity." "In that case," I replied, "I would be proud to accept the position with one additional condition. I want to lead the development of a mentorship program for women in leadership positions at the company. The culture Marcus created was particularly hostile to female executives, and that needs to change." Eleanor smiled. "Consider it done. We need more leaders like you who are willing to stand up for what's right, regardless of personal risk." As for the megacorp acquisition, it wasn't abandoned entirely, but was fundamentally restructured. Under my leadership, we conducted a fresh due diligence process that revealed the actual value of the company to be closer to $1.7 billion. We negotiated a new purchase price based on accurate financials and realistic synergy projections. The deal eventually closed 6 months later at a price that represented fair value for both companies. The SEC launched a formal investigation into Marcus Wilson and Michael Thompson, along with several executives at Meridian Partners. Criminal charges for securities fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy were eventually filed. Marcus's carefully cultivated image as a visionary business leader was shattered, replaced by the reality of an executive who had betrayed his fiduciary duties for personal gain. The aftermath of what became known internally as the Marcus incident transformed TechVision in ways few could have predicted. The immediate impact was painful, but necessary, like lancing a festering wound. Our stock price, which had plummeted upon the initial news of executive suspensions, continued to struggle as the full extent of the financial misrepresentations came to light. Shareholders filed multiple lawsuits, and the company established a substantial settlement fund to address legitimate claims. My first months in the executive vice president role were consumed with financial damage control. Working closely with our new external auditors, I led a comprehensive review of 3 years of financial statements, resulting in a significant restatement of earnings. The process was exhaustive and occasionally demoralizing, but essential for rebuilding credibility with investors and regulators. The executive suite underwent a dramatic transformation. Beyond Marcus and Michael, 3 other senior leaders resigned under pressure when the investigation revealed their complicity in various aspects of the financial manipulation. Jessica Parker, my former boss, took early retirement, acknowledging her failure to act despite her awareness of improprieties. The board appointed Timothy Blackwell, a respected industry veteran with a sterling reputation for integrity, as interim CEO while conducting a search for a permanent replacement. Timothy and I developed a strong working relationship with him, focusing on stabilizing client relationships and company morale, while I handled financial reconstruction and investor communications. The hardest part of recovering from a breach of trust, Timothy told me during one late-night strategy session, isn't fixing the numbers. It's convincing people that the culture has truly changed. That takes consistent action over time, not just new policies or leadership faces. His wisdom proved accurate as we worked to rebuild employee confidence. Many talented individuals had left during Marcus's tenure, disillusioned by the toxic culture he had fostered. Reversing this talent drain became a priority, with particular attention to restoring gender balance in leadership positions. The mentorship program for women executives that I had requested as a condition of accepting my new role launched with strong support from the board. We paired promising female managers with senior leaders, created structured development paths to executive positions, and established a zero-tolerance policy for the kind of subtle gender discrimination that had flourished under Marcus's leadership. Rachel Davidson, who had risked her own career to help expose the fraud, was promoted to general counsel, replacing Michael Thompson. Her legal expertise and unwavering ethical compass made her the perfect choice to rebuild the integrity of our legal department. I never expected this outcome when I shared those documents with you, Rachel confided during a celebration dinner after her promotion was announced. I was just trying to do the right thing, even if it cost me my job. That's exactly why you deserve this position, I replied. Integrity under pressure is rare and valuable. We need more of it in our leadership team. 6 months after the crisis began, we presented our revised deal terms to Megacorp. The negotiation was challenging as their management team initially resisted, acknowledging the financial misrepresentations that had inflated their valuation. With Rachel's legal expertise and my financial analysis, we methodically demonstrated the discrepancies between reported and actual performance. Eventually, Megacorp's board recognized that their options were limited: either accept a fair valuation based on accurate financials or face the prospect of their own shareholder lawsuits when the inflated projections inevitably failed to materialize. The deal was restructured at $1.7 billion, a full $1.2 billion less than the original price, saving TechVision from a potentially catastrophic overpayment. The restructured acquisition actually proved more successful than anyone anticipated. Without the pressure of justifying an inflated purchase price, the integration teams focused on realistic synergies and sustainable growth. Within a year, the combined entity was outperforming conservative projections, helping to restore investor confidence. On the legal front, consequences mounted for those who had orchestrated the fraud. The SEC investigation expanded to include Meridian Partners, revealing it to be little more than a shell company created to facilitate Marcus's kickback scheme. Criminal charges were filed against Marcus, Michael, and 2 executives from Meridian, including counts of securities fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy. Marcus maintained his innocence, publicly hiring a high-profile defense team and attempting to portray himself as the victim of a corporate coup. His strategy collapsed when the Justice Department produced evidence of the offshore accounts he controlled, which had received millions in payments tied to TechVision transactions. Facing overwhelming evidence, he eventually accepted a plea deal that included disgorgement of ill-gotten gains, a substantial fine, and a 5-year prison sentence. The criminal proceedings brought unwelcome publicity, but also provided a definitive break with the past. Each news story about Marcus's legal troubles emphasized TechVision's new leadership and governance reforms, gradually shifting the narrative from scandal to recovery. By the 1-year anniversary of the crisis, financial analysts were describing the company as a turnaround story and a model of corporate rehabilitation. Throughout this turbulent period, I discovered leadership abilities I hadn't known I possessed. Beyond financial expertise, I developed skills in crisis communication, change management, and organizational psychology. Board members regularly commented on my ability to maintain clarity and purpose amid chaos, inspiring confidence, even during the darkest moments of the recovery. Eleanor Winters, who had become a valued mentor, surprised me during a quarterly board dinner by raising a toast to Sonia Mitchell, who saved this company not just through her financial acumen, but through her moral courage. TechVision wouldn't exist today without her willingness to stand up for what's right. The acknowledgement was deeply moving, especially considering how close I had come to having my career destroyed for those same actions. The journey from being escorted out by security as a supposedly emotional troublemaker to being celebrated as the company's moral compass and financial savior was so improbable that it still occasionally felt surreal. As TechVision stabilized and began to thrive again, the board completed its search for a permanent CEO. To my surprise, I was among the final candidates considered for the position, though the role ultimately went to an experienced external candidate with whom I developed an excellent working relationship. The fact that I had been seriously considered represented a complete reversal of fortune. The new CEO, Diana Rodriguez, brought fresh perspectives and complementary skills to our executive team. During our first one-on-one meeting, she was refreshingly direct. "The board told me how you saved this company, Sonia. I want you to know that I value that kind of integrity above all else. We're going to build something special here together." And indeed we did. Under Diana's leadership, and with my continued financial oversight, TechVision regained its industry standing and eventually surpassed its previous market value, this time based on genuine innovation and sustainable growth rather than financial manipulation. The restructured Megacorp acquisition, initially viewed as a scaled-back consolation prize, ultimately proved to be a strategic masterstroke. The integration proceeded more smoothly than anyone anticipated, with the combined company capturing market share through improved product offerings rather than accounting tricks. As our success continued, I was invited to speak at industry conferences about corporate governance and financial ethics. Standing at podiums where Marcus had once held forth with his deceptive narratives, I shared the hard-won lessons from our experience, emphasizing that sustainable business success could only be built on a foundation of integrity. "The numbers always tell the truth" eventually became my signature line in these presentations. The only question is whether you'll be the one to tell it first, or whether it will be revealed at your expense. 1 year after that fateful board meeting where my microphone had exposed the truth, I stood at the podium during TechVision's annual investor conference. The company had undergone a remarkable transformation. Our stock had recovered its losses and was trading 20% above its pre-crisis high. The restructured Megacorp acquisition had exceeded performance expectations for 3 consecutive quarters. Most importantly, we had established a new corporate culture founded on transparency, integrity, and genuine respect for all employees. Good morning, and thank you for your continued confidence in TechVision. I began surveying the room filled with investors, analysts, and business partners. A year ago, many of you questioned whether this company could survive the governance crisis we faced. Today, I'm proud to report that we've done more than survive. We've emerged stronger, more ethical, and better positioned for sustainable growth. As I delivered our financial results highlighting record operating margins and strong cash flow, I reflected on my personal journey. The emotional wounds from my humiliating dismissal had taken time to heal. For months after Marcus's removal, I had struggled with lingering anxiety, starting awake from nightmares where I was once again being escorted from the building under the watchful eye of security. Gradually, with support from friends, family, and even a skilled therapist, I had processed the trauma of workplace betrayal. I learned to trust my instincts again and to value my own moral compass above external validation. Most importantly, I rediscovered the joy in my work, now focused on building something worthy rather than fighting against corruption. The company's healing process had paralleled my own. Initially, employees had been shell-shocked by the revelations about Marcus, and the subsequent leadership upheaval. Trust had been shattered, and rebuilding it required more than flowery mission statements or revised corporate values. We took concrete steps to demonstrate our commitment to a new way of operating. Financial processes were redesigned with robust checks and balances. A strengthened whistleblower program encouraged employees to report concerns without fear of retaliation. Executive compensation was restructured to reward long-term value creation rather than short-term stock price manipulation. Our most valuable achievement this year hasn't been financial, though those results are certainly impressive, I continued in my presentation. It's been the restoration of trust with all our stakeholders, customers, employees, investors, and regulators. Trust is the true currency of business, more valuable than revenue or even profit. Without it, no enterprise can thrive in the long term. My role as Executive Vice President had evolved from crisis management to strategic leadership. Diana Rodriguez, our new CEO, had created a collaborative executive culture where diverse perspectives were genuinely valued. My financial expertise was now directed towards sustainable growth initiatives rather than uncovering past misdeeds. The women's leadership program I had established was flourishing, with 20 promising female executives receiving structured mentoring and development opportunities. Several had already advanced to senior positions, bringing fresh perspectives and balanced decision-making to departments previously dominated by men hired in Marcus's image. Rachel Davidson had transformed the legal department from a tool of executive manipulation into a guardian of corporate ethics. Under her leadership, the department proactively identified potential issues and worked collaboratively with business units to address them before they became problems. Today, I'm pleased to announce the formation of the TechVision Ethics Institute I told the assembled investors. This independent entity, funded by the company but governed by a board of external experts, will conduct research and provide training on corporate governance, financial transparency, and ethical leadership. We believe businesses succeed when they operate with integrity, and we're committed to advancing this principle throughout our industry. The initiative had been my brainchild, born from the realization that the problems we had faced were not unique to TechVision. Many companies struggled with the tension between short-term results and long-term ethical value creation. By establishing the Institute, we hoped to transform our painful experience into a positive force for change beyond our corporate boundaries. As I concluded my presentation and welcomed questions from the audience, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the unlikely journey that had brought me to this moment. The crisis that had nearly destroyed my career had instead revealed my true professional purpose, creating business value through unwavering integrity. After the conference, Eleanor Winters, still serving as our board chair, pulled me aside. "I remember the day you sent that email exposing Marcus's scheme," she said. "The board was initially shocked and skeptical. Some members wanted to dismiss your allegations without investigation. What changed their minds?" I asked, curious about those deliberations I had never been privy to. "The recording, of course," she replied. "But even before we heard it, I argued that someone willing to risk their career to report potential wrongdoing deserved to be taken seriously. Whistleblowers rarely come forward lightly. It wasn't an easy decision, I acknowledged. I had no idea if anyone would believe me over Marcus." Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. "That's the truest test of character, making the right choice when the personal cost is high and the outcome uncertain. You passed that test, Sonia. Many others would have taken the severance package and walked away." Her words captured the most profound lesson I had learned through this experience. Integrity isn't measured when doing the right thing is easy or advantageous. It's revealed in those pivotal moments when standing for truth requires genuine sacrifice, when the path of least resistance beckons with its comfortable compromises. The journey had transformed me from a capable financial executive into a leader with a clear sense of purpose. I now regularly mentored younger professionals, particularly women facing workplace challenges. My advice always emphasized the importance of maintaining one's ethical compass, even when surrounded by pressure to conform to problematic practices. The most valuable asset you possess isn't your technical skill or industry knowledge, I would tell them. It's your personal integrity. Guard it carefully because once compromised, it's extraordinarily difficult to restore. In quiet moments, I sometimes reflected on Marcus's current circumstances. Reports indicated he was serving his prison sentence at a minimum security facility, his reputation and career in ruins. I felt no satisfaction in his downfall, only sadness that a talented individual had allowed ethical compromise to corrupt his considerable abilities. His story had become a cautionary tale in business schools, an example of how short-term thinking and moral flexibility inevitably lead to disaster. My own story, fortunately, had taken a different turn. The crisis that might have ended my career instead revealed my true strengths and values. By refusing to be silenced, I had found my voice. By standing firm against corruption, I had discovered my purpose. As I look toward the future, I remain committed to demonstrating that business success and ethical leadership are not competing values but complementary strengths. The true measure of a company like that of an individual lies not in short-term profits or stock price movements, but in the integrity with which it conducts its affairs and the positive impact it creates for all stakeholders. Have you ever faced a situation where standing up for what's right came with personal risk? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this journey of integrity through adversity resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with others who might find encouragement in knowing that sometimes doing the right thing does lead to justice. Thank you for listening. And remember, your integrity is your most valuable professional asset, worth protecting at any cost.